Okay, so let's get started tonight. I'm ready when the recording starts. Oh, are we recording? Oh, okay. Well, there we go. Well, welcome those of you that are watching on YouTube. Usually I see it says it is now recording, so I didn't hear it. Yeah, I didn't hear it. It's okay. It's okay. We're good. All right, so we're going to start with Jeremiah part 10. And so we're on chapter 10. So here we go. Jeremiah concluded his temple message in this chapter. So this is the ends the temple message. He just preached, he just gave it in one place, right there at the steps of the temple. And we find that his temple message was comprehensive, it was clear. Jeremiah's nation was in peril. The Babylonian enemy was on its way down. The temple and the city of Jerusalem would soon be destroyed, and many of the Jews would be killed and scattered. How sad, isn't it? The entirety of Israel would become a moonscape and a desolation. Why would these people not hear? Why do people in our age not study the book of Revelation? Many fear to look at it. The future desolation of this world has been clearly given. And so there you have it. Even in our day, human nature has not changed. No, it has not. Okay, so before we get into the first part, I just want to say what you're going to see that just give you a summary that what we're going to look at in these verses. This is a polemic where the prophecy contrasted idolatry with godly living. So this is what you see here in this. So he's gonna speak against idolatry, and he's going to talk about the greatness of God. So he give this why do you follow these false idols? In other words, we're going to go into that tonight. Remember, we talked about this hill next to the temple, and you remember what it's called? What they call it in Jeremiah's day? Well, you'll learn in just a moment. What did they call that hill? They call it the Mount of Olives today. It's the Mount of Olives. But it wasn't called the Mount of Olives. I don't think it was in Jeremiah's day. Perhaps, maybe, I don't know. But I know I had a name for it. They had a different name for it. Okay, so let's talk about that tonight. So we find that the people of Judah were addicted to their idolatry, and they simply would not change. Isn't it sad when people become addicted to evil and they just will not change? The gospel won't change them. The power of the gospel won't change them. Why are they going to change? Because of idolatry. They were addicted to their idolatry, and we have that problem today. Okay, so Jeremiah 10, verse 1 through 3. Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. For the customs of the people are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen with the axe. I'll stop right there. We'll come back to that thought. He's working with the axe. He's cutting a tree down. What's that all about? Well, he's forming an idol, obviously. Let's talk about what we've read so far. Jeremiah's people were in a pitiful spiritual state. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. Yeah. These people needed to listen. They needed to stop looking to the foolish astrologers who were openly deceiving them with their signs, like, oh, here comes a comet. Oh, here comes, the phase of the moon, or this is this what do they call it? Eclipse. This eclipse has some significance to some god or goddess. No, no, it didn't. No, they were deceiving them. They were openly deceiving them. But we have it today. We have astrology today, don't we? We do, don't we? Yeah, we do. And it's untrue. The horoscopes are untrue. They're misleading, in fact. And I would even say they're hurtful. No one should read them. And not any professing believer in Jesus should honor them in any way. We should not read them. We should not acknowledge them. We should never entertain them, not even for a laugh. It's not funny. So from this understanding, it would not take long for anyone to see that open idolatry was being practiced by the people of Judah. And I'm going to explain a few things here. And this is found in 2 Kings chapter 23. Very interesting passage, by the way, because it's going to tell us something about what they called the Mount of Olives in Jeremiah's day, and even before that. And the high places that were before Jerusalem, high places, which were on the right hand of the Mount of what? The Mount of Corruption, or today's Mount of Olives. So what did they call it? That's what they called it. Which Solomon, the king of Israel, had builded for Ashtoreth. Now that's a cut down but the actual name of the goddess is Asherah. And she was the sex and fertility goddess, which was the abomination of the Zidonians. Jezebel came from the Zidonians. So that's the Phoenicians of Sidon, Tyre and Sidon. Sidon just below Tyre. And for Chemosh, the abomination of the Moabites. So these idols are up on the Mount of Olives, which is known in that time as the Mount of Corruption. And for Milcom, that's also known as Moloch, the abomination of the children of Ammon, did the king Solomon defile. King Solomon. This goes all the way back to the time of King Solomon. Think of that. Because that's hundreds of years. From Solomon to Jeremiah, what is that? That's like over 500 years. So God endured that for 500 years, over 500 years. The Mount of Corruption, or today's Mount of Olives, stands higher in elevation than the temple that stood in Jerusalem. It does. I mean, I personally discovered that one could look up to the Mount of Olives. I remember one day I was just standing there in the hotel, and I wanted to go to the Mount of Olives, and we got a taxi to actually go to the place where they say that Jesus ascended to heaven. Now we weren't far from it, and I think that's very likely the actual spot, but I don't know that for sure. But when I was standing there at the hotel, I was looking at, and you can see the Mount of Olives right there. I mean, it's just a big ridge, and you could see it. And so when you're standing within the old city of Jerusalem, you can look up to the Mount of Olives. It's a hill. From the time of Solomon, King Solomon, the king of Israel, the son of David, the Jewish people could look up to the hill of the Mount of Olives, and they could see the identity of they could see and identify the smoke of the pagan sacrificial fires. They could see them, which these fires they had to do with the animal sacrifices that would have been devoted to the false gods. Everyone was aware of what was happening up at the Asherah groves and in the Chemosh temples, which were basically ancient brothels. That's what they were. Not only that, but everyone was also particularly aware of the child sacrifices that were wickedly offered and tolerated by the Jews in the valley of Hinnom, but also up there. So Jewish babies were offered to the Ammonite abomination, Moloch. Why were these evil things tolerated by the leaders of Judah for over 400 years since the days of Solomon? No wonder these places on the ridge to the east of the temple were known as dwelling upon the Mount of Corruption. And I would say that Satan always seeks to corrupt everything that God blesses. So it's like exalted over the temple of God for hundreds of years. It's just an awful thing. Now, I know that many of us would like to know what our future holds. We were talking about the horoscopes, the astrology. If we can know what will happen, then our decisions could be easier, our failures could be avoided, and our successes could be assured. These people of Judah also wanted to know what their future held. And they had tried to discern their future by reading the signs on the stars and in the heavenly bodies. This evil practice revealed that they did not know the one true God. All they need to do is read the Bible. Amen? For God was the one who had made the earth and all the universe, including the stars. But these foolish people were consulting and worshiping these created things. No one will ever discover their future in a man-made chart of a star system. It's a fool's errand for anyone to try to do so. Yet God, who promises to guide us, also knows our future, and he will be with us all the way. He will not reveal our future to us, but he will walk with us as our future with him unfolds daily. Our God will not forsake us, so we can trust in him. We should rather never trust in any of the readings of the stars. Rather, we should trust in the one who made the stars and is above all things. He does not just dwell in the universe. He is exalted above it in his glory and in his heavenly praise. Right? Yeah. So if you remember at the end of those verses, he was beginning by talking about going out there and cutting down a tree, right? So now he's going to talk about the wooden idols. So the prophet gave these people the stark contrast between idolatry and the awesome creator of everything, our God, Jeremiah's God. So they deck it, in other words, the tree that the woodsman just cut down in verse 3. They deck it, or this idol, with silver and with gold. So they cover it. They mold gold and silver on it. They fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not, so it doesn't fall over. They are upright as the palm tree, but speak not. They must needs be borne. So you have to pick them up and carry them, because they cannot go. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither also is it in them to do good. Forasmuch as there is none like unto thee, O Lord, thou art great, and thy name is great in might. Who would not fear thee, O King of nations? For to thee doth it appertain. Forasmuch as among all the wise men of the nations, and in all their kingdoms, there is none like unto thee, but they are altogether brutish and foolish. The stock, or the idol, is a doctrine of vanities. It's a doctrine of vanities. It's just a vain thing. It's a foolish thing. It's a brutish thing. What's brutish mean? Does anybody know? What does it mean to be brutish? Stubborn. Another way of saying stupid. Selfless. Selfish, yeah. Selfish and stubborn and stupid. It's just wrong. Jeremiah was declaring the utter foolishness of idolatry. The prophet described the forming of the abominable idols that the people of Judah foolishly worshiped. These idols could not speak. They could not answer their prayers. Remember, they're just right up the hill. They're just right up the hill. They're not more than, what, 400 yards from the temple? Probably less than that. They could not speak. They could not answer their prayers. They could not deliver them out of trouble in any way. Their created statues may have looked impressive. If you've seen any of their statues, what they look like. But they were costly, beautifully fashioned and decorated with gold and gems. But they could not speak, and were created by someone's imagination. and those who followed and believed in them could be seen as fools. The idols were like a scarecrow in the field. Just kind of picture that in your head, like a scarecrow. You've seen a scarecrow, and put out in a farmer's field. Just, they're nothing. Therefore, those who trusted in the idols were trusting in the trunk or a shank of a tree. It did not matter that the idol was carved well and it looked beautiful. The people who worshiped them were fools. They could not give their idols any credit whatsoever. Even the simplest person who worshiped in the true God would be wiser than the wisest person who worshiped these worthless substitutes, since the simple person had discerned who God really is. I think about that. So we worship the true God, and then there's people in this world that they disregard God and they worship money or fame, or there's all kinds of idols that people in Western culture are attached to, and that's all they worship. They don't give God any regard at all. There's no regard for God, and then you think, well, that's foolish. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So we can ask ourselves, in whom do we place our trust? Do we place our trust in the true God, or do we trust in something that is foolish, is silly? Hello, come in. Amen. Is it just you two? Oh, it's good that you came tonight. Wow, what an encouragement. All right. Okay. So let's look at verse 9 through 18 now. So Jeremiah continued to share. Yeah, Simon, can you give her one of the pages? And you can get her a pen. Yeah. We got a little worksheet for you. Yeah. Okay. So verses 9 through 18. So Jeremiah continued to share the contrast between the idols and the true God that made all things. Do you see the polemic already? You see how he's using this contrast. He's talking about how great God is and how the idol is just nothing. Okay, he's going to really, that's why I put these verses together like this, because he really gets into it in these verses, and I want to read it in its entirety. Okay, here we go. Silver spread into plates is brought from Tarshish, and gold from Uphaz. Tarshish is like saying from the end of the earth. We'll get into that. Uphaz was probably a refinery place. The work of the workmen, and of the hands of the founder, blue and purple is their clothing. Still talking about the idols. They are all the work of cunning men. But the Lord is the true God. He is the living God and an everlasting king, and an everlasting king. At his wrath, the earth shall tremble, and the nations shall not be able to abide his indignation. Thus shall ye say unto them, the gods that have not made the heavens and the earth, even they shall perish from the earth. I mean, have you heard of people worshiping Chemosh today? Have you heard of people worshiping Baal today? Have you heard of people worshiping Asherah today? No, they're gone. They're gone. And that's exactly what's happened. They shall perish from the earth and from under these heavens. He hath made the earth by his power. He hath established the world by his wisdom, and hath stretched out the heavens by his discretion. A lot of this, you can find this in the Psalms. When he uttereth his voice, there is a multitude of waters in the heavens, and he causeth the vapors to ascend from the ends of the earth. I mean, this is just like reading the Psalms right here, isn't it? He maketh lightnings with rain, and bringeth forth the wind out of his treasures. Every man is brutish in his knowledge. Every founder is confounded by the graven image. For his molten image is falsehood, and there is no breath in them. They are vanity and the work of heirs. In the time of their visitation, they shall perish. The portion of Jacob is not like them, for he is the former of all things, and Israel is the rod of his inheritance. The Lord of hosts is his name. Gather up thy wares out of the land, O inhabitant of the fortress. For thus saith the Lord, behold, I will sling out the inhabitants of the land at this once, and I will distress them that they may find it so. So that's what's going to happen. So he gives this polemic between the idols, contrasting it with the true God and who he is. It's really interesting. And then he says, this is going to be their answer to those who come to the temple and allow those idols up in the hill. Because remember, where is he standing when he's giving this? He's at the steps of the temple. He is actually standing there, right there, before the temple of God. And people are coming in and out and in and out. And many of those people had been up at the mountain of corruption, and they had been into the brothels of the Asherah Grove and Chemosh. They'd been there. Do you think they appreciated his message? Do you think they liked it? No, they didn't. They hated it. And they hated him for it. That's right. Because as you see, that's okay. The contrast given here by the prophet was that the Lord is the true God. Okay, so there's a contrast once again. He is the living God. And did you see there? He says he is the everlasting king. So Jesus is king. He's always been king. He's king. He's king then. He is the king now. He's the everlasting king. He is the one who will bring the world to their knees one day when humanity has impugned and offended him for the last time. So God will come to the end, just like he came to the end for these people. He endured with them over 400 years as they built their Asherah grove up there on that hill above the temple, and then hypocritically would go into the temple saying, well, we're delivered to do these things. No, they weren't. And then offering their children, putting them in the hands of a heated brass idol, watching them burn their babies right there, hundreds of yards away from the temple. Do you think God was pleased with that? And he endured it for over 400 years. And you can see God's a God of grace, amen? That these people would do these things all the way back to the time of Solomon. Right? Yeah. And they're just like, oh, everything's fine. We're good. No, we're not. God's like, no, you're not. Wait till we get to the covenant next week. Yeah. I mean, Jeremiah's messages are sharp. They're really sharp. So many people would say harsh. Yeah. Because he's going to bring this world to their knees one day when humanity has impugned and offended him for the last time. Armageddon would be coming in the time of the future, and who will be able to stand against God on the day of his coming? No one. No one. That's the answer, of course. It's rhetorical. It's interesting to note that verse 11 was written in Aramaic. So let's look at verse 11 specifically. Thus shall you say unto them, the gods that have not made the heavens and the earth, even they shall perish from the earth and from under the heavens. In the whole book of Jeremiah, there's only one verse in the whole book of Jeremiah that is written in Aramaic, and the rest is Hebrew. And that's the verse. I'll tell you why. Aramaic was the international business language of the ancient world of Jeremiah's day. This was for the pagan people. This was for the Babylonians. That was their message. Because God, listen, God was going to use the Babylonians to bring judgment to his people, but he was going to judge the Babylonians too. We'll get to that. When we get to the end of the book of Jeremiah, you'll see that. He's going to bring an end to them. Okay? Because God is the God of the Babylonians. God is the God of the Moabites and the Ammonites and all those people, the Egyptians. Yeah, everyone. He's the God of the whole earth. And anybody impugns him. So yes, verse 11 is written in Aramaic, the international language of the day. It's like we have English today as being the international language of the day. The Aramaic was the international language of Jeremiah's day. Very interesting, isn't it? So this verse must have carried great importance, don't you think? See, God's message to them was that the gods or the false idols did not make anything, nor did they bring anything to life on this earth. The creative process of all that is living belongs to God alone. No scientist in our day will ever create life from dead chemicals. It will not happen. They think they're pretty brilliant, and in some cases, they are. But they do not have the wisdom of God. They cannot match him. They cannot bring life from dead chemicals. It can't be done. So the idols of this pagan world with every false religion will one day perish forever. Every false religion, it will be gone. Therefore, these people needed to be warned. They needed to turn to the true God. And so that's why you have verse 11 there. Look at it again. Let's read it again. Thus shall ye say unto them, the gods that have not made the heavens and the earth, that have not made the heavens and the earth, even they shall perish from the earth and from under the heavens. And there it is, the indictment to all false religion, all false idols. There it is, verse 11, international language. No exceptions. Exactly right. Good. So the place of Tarshish, we were going to talk about Tarshish because remember we looked at Tarshish when we were reading this portion, and it was located at the far western coast of the ancient world, perhaps in the place which is now called Spain. Now most people in those days would have been very afraid to travel outside the far western Strait of Gibraltar. So you know where the Strait of Gibraltar is. If you go all the way to the far west of the Mediterranean Sea, you got Spain, southern Spain, and then that meets Morocco, right? And there's that strait there known as the Strait of Gibraltar. And it was around in their day too, Jeremiah's day, of course. And so no one, you didn't go past the Strait of Gibraltar and then into the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean. You'd get lost out of there. It was very scary. So it's like saying to the end of the earth, because to them, that was the end of the earth. That was it. That was it. You got to that strait, you didn't go past it because out there was the void of the unknown. It was the outer reaches, outer space to those people. You just didn't go there. And so Tarshish apparently was a source of silver, tin, lead, and iron that would be shipped to Tyre. Ezekiel chapter 27, verse 12. Now, the location of Uphaz is unknown. Some think it might be referring to that place that, what do they call it? No, I can't think of it right now. But anyway, it's probably a metallurgical term for the place of refining gold. So it just could mean just the greatest place of refined gold, the gold of Uphaz. No matter how well or how nicely made or how beautiful the idols were in Jeremiah's day, they would have never had the power of life compared to the true and living God. And the world makes beautiful things. Is that true? Beautiful cars, beautiful this, beautiful that. but it does not compare to God. So if we put all our trust in those things, well, there's no comparison to the true and living God. It is God that made everything that lives and breathes. He made the earth by his power. Nature is established through his wisdom, and space was put together by his discretion alone. The vapors of his voice would cause great waters to settle into the far reaches of outer space. Can you imagine that? When he said that, I just think, God speaks, and the breath of God puts water in the far reaches of outer space to the end of the universe. That's how big he is. That's the illustration there. It is God who made the lightnings, and they're powerful, and all the vapors of the clouds which produce rain. Yeah, God is the provider of the wind, comes from his treasuries. And so, in comparison, man is senseless. That's what I was thinking of. I said selfless, but I really meant senseless. Man is senseless. Man is stupid in comparison, or brutish is the word, and foolish in his knowledge in comparison to God's all-knowingness. So even today, people think, "Oh, we're pretty developed. The world's pretty developed." Truly, we could go on another couple thousand years and keep developing like we're developing, and still there's no comparison. There is no comparison. God has all-knowingness. Those who make images will always be confused. These images are images of falsehood, and they have no life contained within them. There's no life in my phone, is there? It's dead. What about the car? Is there any life in my car? No, it's dead. My car can't deliver me from if I get ill, can it? I pray to my car going to deliver me? No, of course not. They're vain. And those that make them are making a huge mistake. The day is coming when all of these evil things will be destroyed forever. So the idol it's a vain thing. It's an empty thing. And people were giving their devotion to them. And they were doing awful things, bringing them down to a low spiritual ebb, or would say just a fleshly thing. So God, through the prophet, cried out in grief over the sad spiritual state of the people of Judah. Now he's going to cry out. And it's going to be from God, because this part is a little confusing. A lot of the expositors, they get confused by this, because they say, well, who's speaking? Well, I believe God's speaking through Jeremiah. Of course he is. The whole thing he is speaking through Jeremiah. But I think in this case, I believe that God is directly speaking now. And that's what he says here. Woe is me for my hurt. My wound is grievous, but I said, truly, this is my grief, and I must bear it. Now, this is why I believe this is God speaking, because he says, my tabernacle is spoiled, and all my cords are broken. So this is talking about the tabernacle of Moses. He's going all the way back to that. And he's talking about the cords, the ropes that held it down. They're all broken, so it's just flopping. Huh? Yeah. My children are gone forth of me, and they are not. There is none to stretch forth my tent anymore. So now they're gone. And remember, Jeremiah was from the family of Moses. And to set up my curtains, for the pastors are become brutish. So now the pastors, the leaders, what are they like? They're senseless, they're stupid, they're brutish. And have not sought the Lord, therefore they shall not prosper, and all their flocks shall be scattered. So there's a curse upon them because of their foolish leadership. So here are the verses. Sorry, I should have done that for you. There you go. All right, let's go on. So in these verses, God has caused the prophet to illustrate a picture of nomads wandering in the wilderness and not finding a place to pitch their tents. So it is like that, but I believe it's even deeper than that. This is God speaking. These shepherds or leaders of the nation were evil leaders responsible for the distresses that the people would soon face. The flocks were the people of Judah. Instead of guiding people to God, these leaders were leading the people astray from God. That's what they were doing. Were they helping them? No. Oh, we have the temple. We have the temple. He's standing in front of the temple and he's saying, look up that hill. Why aren't you pulling that down? That mount of corruption up there. You know what's going on up there? What about over that valley over there? And he just start pointing. Did the people like that? To be reminded of their idolatry? No, they did not. So this is what would happen. Remember, he talked about that. He said at the end in verse 18, let me read that to you. It says, For thus saith the Lord, I will sling out the inhabitants of the land at this once, and I will distress them, that they may find it so. Sling out. Sling out. What do you do when you sling out? You just take it, like you're taking the trash, taking the rubbish, and go to the tip. Like I go to the tip, and I sling it. That's what he's saying. These people will be just like slung out. Yeah, you can even spin it a little bit. Yeah. I don't know if you want to sling the trash though, like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just like a great throw, because remember they're getting slung all the way to where? Babylon. How far is Babylon? Well, it's not around the corner. I'll tell you that. And the Babylons were coming to cause cruel destruction to Jeremiah's people. They're coming. And this is verse 22 through 25. Behold, the noise of the brutes. Now they're called brutes. The leaders were called brutes, right? But now there's the Babylonian brute. Behold, the noise of the brute is come, and a great commotion out of the north country. Why did they come from the north? Do you remember? Yeah, they'd follow the river. They follow the Euphrates all the way up to Hamath, Syria. Then they come south, and there's a river there. So they could have a place to water their army. So they needed water, they needed food, they needed supplies. There are cities all along the way. They can buy things. So they got thousands of troops. They have to feed them all. So that's how they would come. They couldn't come across the Syrian desert. They would just die. So they have to go kind of do an elbow, and then when they get to Israel, they have to come down from the north. So that's why he says he's coming from the north country, to make the cities of Judah desolate and a den of dragons, O Lord. I know that the way of man is not himself. It is not in man that walketh to direct his steps. Amen. O Lord, correct me, but with judgment, not in thy anger, lest thou bring me to nothing. Pour out thy fury upon the heathen that knew thee not, and upon the families that call not on thy name. For they have eaten up Jacob, and devoured him, and consumed him, and have made his habitation desolate. That's the last word, desolate, of the temple message. Desolate. That's how it ends. But Israel was not like the pagans that surrounded them. They were better people. Well, then why were they not obeying God? You see, God had chosen the Jews out of these ancient nations. The Jews were and are the rod of God's inheritance. He is Jehovah of the armies, the Jehovah of, it says, the Lord of hosts. That's who he is. And it was time for the people to gather their belongings together and to flee. The cities needed to be fortified, for their enemy was coming. The people would soon be slung out of their land, and they would be feeling a great personal distress. By the way, do you realize that the final verse there is quoted during the Passover night? We look at that verse again. Pour out thy fury upon the heathen that know thee not, and upon the families that call not on thy name, for they have eaten up Jacob and devoured him and consumed him and had made his habitation desolate. They would read this on the Passover night. It is a tradition from the time of Jeremiah, maybe probably many years after. Isn't that interesting? So God's ability to direct our lives is far superior to our ability to do so ourselves. Right? Can God lead me better than I can lead myself? How about you? And we will all agree with that. But it's one thing to agree with that, and there's another thing to practice it. Right? Because we can all say, oh, yes, of course, God is the one that should lead me. But the question is God leading you? And are you trusting in his leadership in your life? That's the real question we should ask ourselves. Because Jeremiah is telling them, he says, look, you're trying to lead yourself. Look what you're doing up there. Look how you're living. Who should you follow? Yeah, follow God. Because his ability to direct our lives is far superior to our ability to do so ourselves. We agree with that statement, but do we really? Sometimes we are afraid of God's power in his plans because we know that his power would easily crush us if he used it against us. True. We should not be afraid to let God correct our plans. He will give us wisdom if we are willing to obey him, right? Sure he will. We just need to obey him. We need to do what's right. So then the brute. Let me just read this to you because I missed something. Now the prophet cries out in distress. This was a wound, a grief that Jeremiah must bear. His home would be looted and his family would scatter. There would be no children to do the daily service for the temple. It was because these national leaders were brutish or they were stupid. These leaders did not seek the Lord. It's just stupid. It really is. They would not prosper, and all the flocks of the people would be scattered. You know, I remind that verse that says, "The fool has said in his heart that there is no God," and a nation is led by fools. People say, "Well, there's no God." They're fools. A nation's led by fools. It's a judgment. So now the brute or the cruel one would come and would stir up great trouble in Judah. And this cruel one would come from the north or from Babylon, and they're brutes. And all the city of Judah would become a desolate pile of rubble. The beasts and the jackals would feed on the flesh of the dead. Oh, nice. Thank you. That's fine. So then the repentant remnant of Israel spoke. And that's what you have in these verses. This is the answer. This is how we answered this message. How Jeremiah answers it. Man cannot know his own way. Right? We cannot know our own way if we want to get to God. Because it's God who leads, not man. Therefore, Jeremiah hoped that God would correct them, lest man would destroy them completely until there's nothing left to rebuild. And you say, well, I thought that was talking about God. Well, yeah, because God allowed them. But the problem is, when God allows someone to do the job, they're much more cruel than God would be. Would God rather bring his indignation upon the pagans that had nothing to do with him? Why don't you judge the Babylonians? God, well, he will, and he did. God had seen what the Babylonians would do to his people. They would eat up their resources and they would destroy their homes. And then what was the final word? Desolate. That's where it ends. Whenever we trust in the way of man and we're not trusting in God, that's where it ends. One simple word, desolate, desolate. We don't want that. Thank you for watching and listening. So it is one of those messages you got to really think about. And we will see you next time. Thank you.